Hi, at 60, I honestly thought the most exciting part of my life was over. Boy, I could not be any more wrong. So when I was 60, I was married, I was living in the Bay Area, I was working for a very, very, very prominent tech company in Silicon Valley. I had a very large position covering all of the Bay Area for this very big tech company. I was married 10 years and that was my life. And I really thought that things were moving forward. And I thought I was happy. I mean, at the time, I thought I was happy. Don't get me wrong. At the time, I thought I was happy. I mean, I can look back now and see that I wasn't happy. And then somewhere in that, about 3 years of working with this tech company, I worked in corporate food service for many, many years. There was a reorg, and I was reorged out. And it was actually quite a shock. And I ended up taking the next year off. I basically did some contract recruiting work in the hospitality profession because I was like, what do I want to, what do I want to be when I grow up? And in that time that I took off, and then that whole process of getting reorged out of this job, which was a really big hit to my ego, to be honest, at the time, I just started noticing that I was the sole purpose leading my relationship, my marriage. I was leading it. I was kind of head of household. I was directing where we were going and just felt a huge amount of responsibility on my shoulders. And I felt like I was carrying much of the financial burden, although don't get me wrong, at the time it didn't feel like a burden. It was like I liked what I did. Made good money. I liked what I did. I didn't mind working a lot of hours, all of that. So it wasn't a burden. But I realized that I felt like that I was the only one in the game. And it just, over the course of that year doing this contract work, I had a lot of time and I could take the clients on that I did. And it just opened, it gave me some time to breathe, to not work 50 or 60 hours a week, to not go, okay, well, we're working Monday through Friday. We'll go out to dinner Friday night. What are we going to do to Saturday together? It was kind of this like planned monotony. But at the time it seemed fine. Like, it's not like I was in this space of, oh my God, my life's horrible. And then while I had that time to think, like, I started really thinking about what do I want to do and what is working with that. And then I started looking at my marriage of what is working with that. And I started noticing things. And again, when I was 60, I've only been divorced 4 years. So I sat in this for a while. So when I think about the most exciting part of my life was prior to 60, it's not like I just jumped out and recreated my life. But I took that year to really think, and part of it gave me time. I have been in a group doing transformational work, which is why I'm a big proponent of group work, with a wonderful teacher, and I have a group of people that I can bounce things off of. And I think because I had that year off and I wasn't just leaving for work at 7 o'clock, getting home at 5 o'clock, I just started looking at everything and started seeing things that I hadn't really seen before. It's not that they weren't there. Again, it takes two to tango in a marriage. It takes the same thing to show up in work and enjoy it. And I just started noticing things and being more inquisitive and seeing things. And for me, seeing things that weren't necessarily working, I had to feel them. And I could feel the disappointment that I was seeing in my marriage. I could see the disappointment that I was feeling in my career. And I really just started questioning, what is this all about? And I ended up tracking myself back to, why am I so focused on performing? Why am I so focused on being driven at work or being driven in my marriage and driving my marriage? I'm sure my ex did not like that. Again, I didn't see it at the time. And just really going back to some of those patterns, childhood patterns. I mean, I don't care if you're 60 or 70 or 80. If you haven't dealt with your shit, it's still there. You are playing it out in every relationship that you're in. And I started just really looking, I'm an empath. And what I mean by that is, I grew up being hypervigilant. I feel things. I needed to feel things to know what was going to go on next, to calm everybody down so that it was safe. like was all about safety. If you look up being an empath, highly sensitive, typically can be triggered by trauma. I grew up in a very volatile, emotionally volatile family, and just really started connecting all these dots. And I think that's so important if you're going to look at your 60s and go, where did this start and where am I going and what's the goal? And the goal for me is I want to be happy. And I didn't even know what that was at the time. So I started digging more into the work I was doing with my wonderful teacher and my wonderful group and feeling more. And it really dredged up a lot of old grief, a lot of old pain emotionally, but then also seeing how I was creating that in my relationship, in my marriage, in the jobs that I went after where, you know, I'm a people pleaser. So I'm an empath. I don't want to rock the boat. I want everybody to be happy. This is how I grew up. And, you know, I found myself in my career always taking the high road. And I'm a very strategic person. I know how to manage a budget really well. And I can see things. I'm very strategic. And I see things in some ways because I see things. I mean, I just see things. But I always didn't voice them, and I always resented it. And then I started resenting things in my marriage. And somewhere in that journey 10 years ago, I just like, what do I want to do? Where do I want to be? I am not happy. And I floundered for a couple of years. Do not get me wrong. My high-tech company, working for that high-tech company, actually led me into another high-tech company where I ended up getting reorged again. But I really saw, it was so clear why, you know, I was seeing where they needed to be in a different way than they really wanted to look at. None of it was bad. None of it was bad. It was a great experience. But somewhere in those 6 years before I got divorced, I just really started focusing on learning to have boundaries and learning to express myself. And I'm not someone that had boundaries. My boundaries were whatever the people that I was with boundaries. So that was my marriage, that was my friends, that was my work. You know, your boundaries were my boundaries. And I, even though I felt these things in the past, I didn't allow myself to feel them. So I think about this journey where I am now. So I am no longer married. I've been divorced 4 years-ish, somewhere in there. I'm no longer in corporate America. I'm actually not even in management anymore. God, it took me 10 months to just let go of, God, who am I without my career? I'm living in San Diego. I am a regular beach walker. I just love it. I'm in just a much more spacious environment and having the time to feel what I'm feeling that day or what's important to me. And I'm also in a new relationship, which, you know, happened out of the blue. Like, it certainly wasn't planned. This was very coincidental how I met this person. And every day I get to show up and be honest with what I'm feeling or be honest with my boundaries and say, and I'm learning to be that person from a very authentic place versus a defensive place or an accusatory place. Like, I'm really wanting to be heard and I'm wanting to be compassionate, which is news for me because I used to, you know, when I took the high road all the time, I noticed that it would come out in reactive behavior at times because I wasn't flowing. It's kind of like I was back up and then at some point I'd be reactive. And I don't find myself doing that in my relationship. And I certainly don't find myself doing that in what I'm doing now with career and I'm working with pets. So I think about, you know, how do you change? How did I change? This is what worked for me. And I slowed down enough to feel myself. And then I slowed down enough to look at the patterns that I wasn't noticing and where they came from and what I'd worked through in childhood and 20 years of therapy and what I didn't work through, and just started feeling my way through my process. And it's fascinating where I am today, 10 years later. And, you know, amazingly so, after I got divorced, I dated someone, and it was a train wreck. And it was fun, don't get me wrong, it was fun. And in many ways, it was a train wreck, but it broke my heart. This person broke my heart. They didn't break my heart. I broke my heart because I stayed. But in that breaking of my heart, it was like the last piece of me that needed to open up so I could really feel what was important to me. And actually, it was a blessing in disguise. And I send this person wonderful energy all the time for the grace of how it supported me. So between my group and being in a group and getting feedback and getting those irritations that I see in other people, knowing that it's something that myself that I haven't completely worked through yet. So I think it's looking at that, making changes, really getting in touch with what will make me happy. And again, I'm sitting here 10 years later and I do not have it all figured out. But I'm actually really happy. And the changes that I did make, I had to take action. And some of them were good changes, and some of them I had to take a few steps and repeat things and all of that. I don't think there's any wrong answer to any of this. But I think the thing is, you have to take action, and you have to take it from a place of getting in touch with yourself and your focus and your journey and all the bullshit of who you are today and what's hanging on that you still need to let go of. And I know it sounds like a big process, and it was a big process, but it's definitely brought me a lot of joy and a lot of happiness. And I continue to believe that it is never too late to reinvent yourself. And I say this from this place of walking through that door myself, which wasn't easy. I didn't want to see the door. I didn't want to see the issues. I didn't want to look past the door. I definitely didn't want to feel all this stuff. But in this process of feeling everything and then making choices from a much more conscious place, from a higher place, because I'd kind of cleaned up some internal shit, here I am today, and, I'm thinking about the next couple of years and what's going to make me happy. And, I have some things in mind, and I will continue to share them. But just remember, it's never too late to reinvent yourself. Don't think you can't. Look for support. And at some point, I'm going to be doing more coaching, so I will continue to keep you involved in that. But please, if this helps you in any way, continue to follow my journey. I'm really enjoying sharing it. Anyway, have a great day.